Hello. There we go. The mute was, I must have bumped the mute. Boom. I am back. Welcome, one and all. Good to see everybody here on this cold winter Tokyo night. Good to see we've got Barry Convex. Good to see you, Quint Rankid. Tech Art too. Good morning to you, Mr. Quaddy Chip. Do I have lots of stories? I've got a few stories. I would say I've got, like, the last few weeks I haven't had that many. I've got a few, not a lot. But yeah, we've got Sergeant Bilko. Good to see you, a man in Sweden. Good to have you along. Will, no audio. Yes, I found the audio mute button I must have hit by accident, so apologies for that. Let me come and sit over here in the middle of the shot, and bring the mic a little bit closer over. Yes, that works better. And Quint Rankid, yes, thank you everybody. Thank you for pointing out the audio. I'm here. Hope you're having a good one. It has been an interesting few days in international news. Very, very distracting. I'm sure you've all kind of been the same, but I've been kind of, telling myself, look away from American news, and as soon as I do, I'm going back looking for what's happened next, including hoping to see a lot of people getting arrested. I mean, that was just right up to the people who started the riot there. So yeah, it's gone pretty fully nuts over there. I mean, I'm impressed. It is like that reality show that kind of knows its time is up and is just trying to outdo itself. When you think that they've gone through every every sort of barrier that you can have, they find new ones. And only a few days ago, and even then, the one topic of interest, which I've included in the topics tonight, which is again on the way out, basically saying normalizing with Taiwan, which is a good thing. Is actually something that I support. It's something I suspected, maybe just to screw China, that maybe they would perhaps have the courage to do in the beginning of this administration, where they said they were going to change these things. And look, I'm not going to say that everything that's happened in the last 4 years has been a bad thing or a disaster. And any government of the US always has a lot of people working for it and a lot of people with sincere motives. And look, I think particularly the huge steps in the Middle East, of peace with Israel and so on, that so many countries have made under US guided negotiation. I mean, there's been some big wins, and I would have thought that some measure of normalization with Taiwan would have been great. However, doing it like basically tossing a grenade into a room on the way out, probably, very probably going to trigger retaliation from China, and possibly military aggression towards Taiwan, which US may have to put lives on the line to protect. And to do that when you've got 6 days left in the job, and you're possibly going to get Americans killed over it, is something that is kind of irresponsible from a decision-making perspective. But I think it is the right call. So I'll take that out. Don't need that anymore. But yeah, I've got that coming up in the news topics. But yeah, we are in the second state of emergency. The third wave is going kind of nuts here in Japan. You may have seen on the news, you may not have seen on the news. This chair that I'm sitting in, that I've been sitting in actually probably the whole time, or maybe not the whole time, but I've had this chair for about 8 years now. And it is actually, after nearly a year of working from home, it is starting to fall apart. Now, I've been researching chairs lately, and everyone's saying, get a Herman Miller. And, the Herman Millers in Japan are like $2,000, which costs more. My Triumph, which I think the only car I've ever owned in New Zealand was a Triumph Dolomite. It was 1,500 New Zealand dollars. So to see that basically these desk chairs that everyone's telling me I should buy cost double what my car cost is hard to swallow. But I keep seeing from all directions that they are great things, so I'm contemplating that. But in the meantime, I had someone asking me in a chat the other day if there were cows mooing nearby, and no, it's that my chair has become squeaky, and you may hear that during the show. That's why I suddenly started talking about chairs just now. Yeah, we have Tokyo 503. Boom, yes, welcome to the chat. Good to see you here. American money printers go brr, I'm sure they do. Dan H, good to see you, and hoping that everyone is well indeed. Mr. Cordychap, Herman Millers are crazy. They are crazy, but yeah. Well, this is the thing. I mean, if I'm going to be, the way I don't really see, I'm not working in a place that's declared permanent working from home forever, but at the same time, even if we can go back to the office, and I do want to go and see my colleagues and work with them in the same space at the same time, I've become comfortable and actually pretty efficient. And given that my commute is over an hour, I can't see going back to a situation where I'm working like less than half the time at home going forward. And from that perspective, it makes sense. This is why I got the awesome keyboard that I showed you guys last week. In fact, did I show you guys this? I think I did. But it is my beautiful keyboard. Yeah, I'm just making my environment here more comfortable, and it's pretty cool. Thank you, Dan H. A little bit closer to the chair. Yes, well, everything everything pays off. Thank you, sir. Wow, Barry Convex. It's funny when I said this is what surprised me. I went onto Twitter today and I said, hey, what should I get? And a number of people came out and said, Herman Miller, specifically Aaron's, came out. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but a number of people said that. And everyone says that nobody regrets buying them, which is surprising given the price. But yes, Theodore Sharp. Hello. Yes, indeed. Crazy stuff in America. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, do what Theodore just did. If you @ Mark=Simon in the comments, it will flash orange. I will pay attention to it. I will either respond immediately or soon after. You can also do what Dan did, although honestly, don't worry. You can just @ Mark me. I do appreciate that, of course. And I will. I never miss anyone on purpose if they @ Mark me anyway. I'll always notice that. So yeah, remember, if you want to get my attention, @ Mark=Simon. If you if you're enjoying having some content that's maybe a bit different from what you might see in your regular news, remember to like. It does help. I do appreciate it. And yeah, let's get into the topic, shall we? It's been this week. Well, I mean, the week started with basically the Tokyo governor. It was kind of seen as the Tokyo and the Chiba and Kanagawa, I think Saitama as well, the 4 governors and the government region, Shutoken region. They all came up to the government and said, look, the numbers here are getting crazy. We want to have another state of emergency. And there was actually, it's funny, there were a lot of stories that there's a bit of tension between the Tokyo governor Koike, who you might recall is a former LDP environment minister. She used to be in the LDP and was actually in the cabinet, but she skipped out to run for Tokyo governor. And when she did, and the Tokyo chapter of the LDP said, no, we've already got our good old boy who wants to become the governor of Tokyo. We don't want no, lady coming in taking his job. She said, fine, she'll quit the party and run against the LDP, and she won. And even then, she's worked with the LDP. She still is actually LDP in terms of her background. But yeah, apparently where the government was starting to look at creating a law for to enable proper lockdowns in Japan, seeing it getting worse, and the problem always being that there's no enforcement mechanisms, there's no authority under which prefectures can, for example, fine people if they go out, or impose basically mandatory lockdowns, and they were looking at creating this law. And Koike kind of ruined their flow by coming and saying, no, I want a state of emergency now. And some people are saying, well, you'd actually be better served letting the government continue trying to get this law into place that allows actual lockdowns. But and this is just a publicity stunt, given that you can't really do anything with it anyway. This was apparently reported that this was the debate between the government and Tokyo. But Tokyo's kind of like, well, it's kind of ridiculous that the numbers now, we got up to 2,500 a day this week in Tokyo. Nationwide, we are now up to like 7,500 a day. So, given that we were panicking a while ago, having like 100 cases a day, and now we're at 2,500, and government's kind of saying, hey, what are you doing? Just going for publicity, and so on. Hey, Ilrock 299, good to see you. Yeah, it was a weird debate. I mean, clearly. there should be a state of emergency. And so they declared the state of emergency. But unlike the first state of emergency back in April, was it, or March, or whenever it was, when they closed schools, they really strongly said to companies that you should have everyone either not working or working from home. They've gone a lot softer this time. The only restrictions have been telling restaurants that they should please close at 10, and some should actually stop by 8. Some people say, well, do you not catch coronavirus after 8? Is it like gremlins eating food? And it's not that. It's that if you close the restaurants at 8 o'clock, most people will skip their plans for going out to restaurants for dinner, and the restaurants have noticed this. And they're saying, well, that'll basically ruin our night trade. And if for restaurants that rely on dinner trade or going home from work trade, and people are just going to skip doing that, they need financial compensation, and they're basically not getting that. So a lot of them are saying, screw you. The other thing that's prominent is that while people were genuinely spooked and panicked during the first state of emergency, and there really was a lot of people staying at home, numbers showing the number of people going out and about at the moment is much more. And if you ask me why that is, it's probably two main factors. First of all, people are just tired of the lockdown, and frankly, we've never really had a proper lockdown, but the state of panic, which kind of made everybody stay at home, it's hard to keep that up for like 9 months, and that's how far we're into this now. So some people who are just out and about are just like, well, can't stay home forever. We're just going to go out and see my friends and have dinner and whatnot, and people are just doing that. And the other part of it is that the government, while telling people that they're responsible for keeping the pandemic under control, has been paying people to go out to restaurants and travel for 9 months. So it's kind of hard to undo the signal that this is like what you should be doing. And when people went out and did it, even though there was a pandemic going on, and they went out and traveled, and for the majority of people, I suppose, I mean, the numbers are bad, but they're still not anything like the majority of people who travel got it. Most people went out to restaurants and they went out traveling and they didn't get it, although a lot more people got it than were getting it before, which implies it did probably contribute. But the end result is most people have kind of developed that sense that maybe is more common in Europe and America, that some people are just idiots and feel like they're just not going to get it, and they can just act like idiots and rely on everybody else to do the right thing. And the result is that it doesn't really feel that much more like a lockdown now than before. Now, I don't know what to think about that either. I mean, in my own situation, I don't have much need to go out day to day. And truth be told, I'm glad that my son is going to school and that they haven't shut down the schools. There's been like one case at my son's school, and it was in a different year. It seems inevitable that it's going to get, just by numbers and location and so on, that it's going to happen. But yeah, it seems like people are just accepting that the disruption caused by this, and the hardship it caused during the first lockdown isn't worth it. Which implies that everybody's kind of just going soft a little bit on dealing with this. And if that's the case, that's fine. But the number of people in critical care, the number of available hospital beds to look after people, basically now the medical system in Tokyo is now at collapse point. And they've said that there was a case last week where a kid who had been hit by a car was in a ambulance for a number of hours, being turned away from every hospital that they were trying to take. Basically a road accident for a kid. He couldn't find an emergency room that would take him because they were all overwhelmed with virus patients. And they redirected the ambulance to other hospitals. And while this kid was being driven around looking for an emergency room that they could take a kid from a road crash to, the kid died in the ambulance. And these kind of stories are starting to happen, and they're starting to happen more. And it's a combination. It's just not just the number of beds so much. It's actually the fact also that the number of nurses is basically the number of people who can look after patients in critical care 24 hours. Is at the full limit. There's no extra, even if they have extra beds, they don't have the staff to look after the people who are in them. A number of nurses who are often not getting paid overtime by the hospitals. They're not getting sufficient funding for looking after the extra patients and the extra hours required looking after them. A lot of nurses in particular are burning out and quitting. The government this week actually asked for university students, medical students, to come out and start taking the role in the place. It's not something you can suddenly fix. You can't just suddenly certify a whole bunch of new nurses, but they're trying to patch it, but it's a shortage of people now. And then there's a question, how are they going to deal with that? For a time in Osaka, they were talking about getting the military to help. which they did temporarily, but the military pointed out you don't really call in the military, when you want to nurse people. You do it more when you want to shoot people. Those weren't their exact words. But yeah, to me, okay, do you take the patients out to other prefectures? And that's the other thing that's been interesting about the state of emergency. One thing that was remarkable about the first state of emergency was that because it was focused on the big cities, particularly Tokyo, the discrimination, most of the other parts of Japan hadn't had coronavirus yet. And there was this whole big discrimination thing about trying to keep the coronavirus out of Yamanashi, out of Iwate, out of these places. And I talked about that at the time, and there was a sort of discrimination that even having a Tokyo number plate and going out to Nagano, your cars would get vandalized, people would get kind of like confronted and told to go home. It was kind of pitchforks and mobs kind of treating people from Tokyo like they had the virus. I cynically joke that the one good thing about the Go To Travel campaign is that, after the Go To Travel campaign, the virus had spread everywhere and no one could really discriminate against Tokyo people anymore. However, now that they've declared the state of emergency, it was notable that some of the towns in Shizuoka Prefecture, adjacent to Kanagawa, have actually put signs up on the road, on the sort of prefecture border saying, "Turn back, we don't want you here." So that kind of, don't come to our village mentality is already restarting a little bit, but for all of that, it is a lot less dramatic than it was earlier in the year, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose. But yeah, I see more people rocking up into the comments. Let's go and say hello. Yasa, indeed, locking down hard. We've got Sterling Archer, good to see you. COVID is just flu with a better publicist. Well, it's I know some people who have had it, and it is I've had the flu and it's a lot nastier than the flu, and it's killing a lot of people. So yes, you can take it lightly, and that's why people are dying from it. So yeah, Odie Jr., good to itty bitty late boom. Good to have you for any sort of a boom. Yasa, indeed, locking down hard with the polite requests. There may be more, as I was just saying. The government is looking at giving some more teeth to lockdowns. We are probably, by the way, in Japan looking to start getting vaccinations. And look, they've already got doses, they've secured something like 200 million doses already, and they're still going to get more than that. I think some of the doses, some of the types of vaccinations, you need 2 doses. But they are going to be looking to give elderly and medical care workers, they're looking to get it approved, and they're already planning the logistics before it's even approved for getting vaccinations out from February, with an idea of getting it out to the entire population of residents, so it includes foreigners, before like the end of May or June or something like that. Again, questionable given the lack of information infrastructure within the government. Even trying to hand out cash to people, they couldn't do that, let alone how it's going to work with vaccinations. But yeah, the plan is everybody living in Japan is going to get vaccination shots by the summer, hopefully. No question, it's tied to the Olympics. But look, whatever gets their whatever makes it more of a priority and focuses the mind, I'm happy about that. But yeah, there is definitely, at the moment, there are definitely signs that I think there are predictions this week by a Google AI thing that Tokyo could, if the way the trends are going, we could see 4,000 plus cases a day, 4,500 within this week, which is amazing. How I was feeling panicked at 200 cases a day like 3 weeks ago. And today, because it's a weekend, the numbers went down from 2,500 to like 1,400 something today, and I was like, oh, that's not so much. It's amazing how quickly you become desensitized to bad numbers. But yeah, back into just welcoming people in. We've got the Gene. Boom, good to have you in here indeed. Did you miss something? No, you just missed the same news story I've been saying since March. But yes. Sachifu asking, so Osaka isn't in a state of emergency? Well, Osaka, yeah, ever the mini-me to Tokyo's Dr. Evil. And it's kind of funny how Osaka is always trying to be the number 2 city. And they're not the number 2 city, they're the number 3 city. Yokohama is the number 2 city. They're But yes, they originally were saying like last week, yeah, we can, in Osaka, we've got everything under control. We're not going to need to do that sort of Tokyo-style state of emergency drama. And immediately when Tokyo got the state of emergency, Osaka's numbers were as bad as Yokohama's. And everyone was sort of saying, really, Osaka, you're not doing a state of emergency? And they were like, yeah, on second thought. So I think it was Kyoto, Osaka, and Hyogo, which is Kobe, they all have asked for their own state of emergency, which the government's currently considering. And I think Nagoya is heading in that direction as well, Nagoya and Gifu Prefecture. So, yeah, they're in a bad way as well. And frankly, all the big cities are. Fukuoka's getting bad again, but particularly Nagoya, Osaka, Tokyo, they're all pretty screwed at the moment. So, yeah, Sachifu, good to have you there in the comments. And Sterling Archer, yeah, well, whatever. Good morning, Greg. Good morning from Texas. Good to have Texas here, Greg. Good to see you. John Anderson, hi from London. Bit of a COVID war zone over there. I have heard that. I have a sister and family living in London. Seems like you can still go for walks and stuff there, which is I'm glad to see. But it indeed looks pretty grim over there, and that's exactly what we're looking to not become over here. In fact, that new extra contagious strain, it looks like it's well and truly here, and people are getting it. In fact, I don't know if I put the story on here for the topics tonight, but there was one thing. They changed the rules with customs immigration, that they are now going to require, at the moment, for all foreigners that want to visit Japan, or return to Japan, even if you're a resident, you need to produce a test proving that you don't have coronavirus that's given within 72 hours of coming back to Japan. And some people pointed out this is a very difficult thing to get, like some countries, to get the type of test that Japanese immigration wants, and to arrange it and to get the result, in time for your flight, like on a schedule. It can be hard to get in some places, and it's been another one of the many barriers and challenges that foreigners have had for getting back to Japan. But the funny thing is, of course, this is required for foreigners. It's not required for Japanese people. And, like when they stopped all foreigners coming back to Japan because they were worried about this UK variant of coronavirus coming into the country, like the next day they found it in the community in Tokyo, and it had been brought in by Japanese people who weren't coming back from UK. And this is the point. They weren't even testing Japanese people. It's like the whole policy since February has been based on the idea that Japanese can't bring the disease into the country. So yeah, for the first time, the Japanese government said this week that they are now going to require proof of not having coronavirus, like tests, before coming back to Japan for all people, i.e. including Japanese people. Science. It's amazing, right? So yes, indeed, a lot of stuff going on. John Anderson, stay safe, obviously. Good news is I don't know that it's going to completely end with vaccines, but there is some hope that it will at least get under some measure of control, which clearly London is one of the worst places right now. So yeah, hopefully if you guys can lock down and get things a bit better very soon. I'm thinking of you guys, so yeah, definitely. Christopher Luke, good to see you. And welcome to the chat. We've got Rainier Avon. Good to have you in the chat. In fact, I think it just jumped a minute, so let me just make sure I'm catching everybody. Good to see so many people rocking in. Sainted Sir, hello. Good to have you. And we have... yeah. Sterling Archer, you look like a U.S. health, like sick people have it coming to them or something. That's fine. Go to a country with no medical system and deal with it. I think we all accept that anyone can get sick, and you never know what's going to happen with it. I'm quite happy to pay into collective healthcare. This is exactly why you have a socialized health. It's why every country in the world has it. At least every civilized country except for one. So yeah, Travis Moore, excellent to see you. Waving right back at you. Good to see. Dan H, how are the Japanese right-wing anti-monetary stimulus and deficit? Well, actually, before that, believe in yourself. I just see. Sorry, believe in yourself. Good evening, Simon and Yaol. Indeed, welcome. Believe in yourself. Good to have you here in the comments. Dan H, how are the Japanese right-wing, or I suppose conservatives in this case, anti-monetary stimulus and deficit balancing, talking about the further debt and deficit? It's funny, this is a thing about, at least when you have the LDP in government, they are the arch-conservative party. There really is no, there have been come and go more right-wing parties than the LDP in parliament, but under Abe, it's kind of funny. Abe kind of sucked up and wiped out, could have took away the reason for more conservative parties existing. So the only real dissent and conservatism is within the LDP party. And again, Suga's got all of that well wrapped up and under control. So there isn't really dissent. I think everybody, and the thing fundamentally is that it's not so much conservative and book balancing politicians debating with one another. In Japan, it's fairly well understood, particularly in the LDP, that you need to pork barrel and spend money in order to be re-elected. So the debate is really more between the LDP that wants to actually spend on stimulus money and so on, and the Ministry of Finance that's been tasked with balancing the books, and it's going to all hell at the moment. I mean, and it is a thing. Right now, for the last few years, it's been like this, but now it's gone into a much more extreme spiral where the Japanese budget is actually spending, trillions of dollars. I can't remember the number, but it's basically, it's almost double. It's like they get 2.5 something trillion dollars or whatever revenue from taxes, but they have a budget of 4.5 trillion spending, and they're making up the difference through government bonds that they're issuing. And I assume Japanese banks and large businesses are just buying out of sort of an obligation, which is great. It's better than having Germany buying them or the IMF buying them. You end up in an Argentina situation when you have people who might just want to call in the debt sometime. This is how Japan has sort of sustained itself since the 1970s, but its debt ratio is, of course, spiraling worse. Everybody knows that's a problem, and I think that I've talked about this before. This is why the Japanese government is so focused on things like digitization. It looks like it sounds great. Hey, put all the services on the internet and make Japanese, government work better and use IT better. It all sounds good, but the underlying thing, and this is linked to the My Number social security number system, and the idea is to make it mandatory and to integrate it with driver's licenses and have it on phones, and to promote electronic cash, is to make all transactions traceable and to get rid of Japan's massive untaxed cash economy that it has, and i.e. Because politicians are not allowing the Ministry of Finance to increase sales tax, to increase revenue, to cover the enormous spending that's going on, they're looking to collect more tax where it's not being collected right now by eliminating the cash economy. And that's going to have a really interesting set of repercussions for, most obviously, I think, for the night trade in Japan. Japan's got an enormous economy of miso shobai, which is everything from just hostess bars to sort of full-on prostitution and gambling that happens entirely in cash and involves people in regular day jobs that don't want that to be tracked, obviously. And the government's looking to make that basically impossible to do and to tax everything that they can out of it. It's going to change the society a lot, as well as all the other things. So, yeah, I think everyone's kind of accepted this is part of the urgency being driven behind, and why the Ministry of Finance is also agreeing to spend a ton of money on IT system upgrades in the government, because it's all aimed at collecting more revenue. Because right now the books are going crazy. I mean, Japan is actually in a worse debt situation than Greece was when it collapsed. It's just distributed in a different way. So yes, indeed. Bob Turner, good to see you in the comments. Will the Olympics will be stands full of people this year? That is a good question. In fact, one of the stories I've got coming up is talking about the sumo, which is being limited to 5,000 people, which still seems like quite a lot. 65 wrestlers didn't show up, either because, like the grand champion Hakuho, they actually have COVID-19, or because they are terrified of getting it and they don't want to come to Tokyo, because most of them are from other parts of the country and they are boycotting and staying away, including one wrestler yesterday, who very publicly quit and said he was quitting because he was afraid of catching COVID-19 if he had to go to Tokyo to wrestle at a tournament. So, that is the interesting thing, isn't it? Of course, like I mentioned earlier, the government seems to be rushing its whole vaccine program and the state of emergency that we have in Tokyo. It's all connected to the goal of getting Tokyo ready for the still being able to host the Olympics in July. And look, obviously to me, I think it was a stupid idea before the pandemic, because you still had all of this money and construction that was needed to rebuild the northeast Japan region from the tsunami and earthquake and nuclear accident. And all of that money got redirected to Tokyo, and that area has just not recovered as a result of it. And for that alone, I thought it was a bad idea, let alone all the other reasons it's a bad idea when you throw the pandemic on top. But at the moment, it's all blazing ahead. But it's hard to think how it can happen. Even if Tokyo miraculously gets itself in a state that the stands could be full of Japanese people watching the Olympics, you still have to question, what about the athletes? I mean, Japan might be the only country in the world, maybe save Australia or New Zealand, and maybe they won't feel comfortable coming to Tokyo, that is even in a state to send people. So I have no idea how it's going to work, but they're still going. That's what they're going for, Bob Turner. They're going for full stands. So what can you do? God, conspiracy theorists. Well, I like a conspiracy as much as the next person, but I must admit my patience for conspiracy theories has thinned a little this week. So, for other reasons, obviously, but yeah, go ahead. Shubus, in fact, let me make sure I'm catching. Well, a lot of chat happening. Wow, we've got all these new people coming in. Let me make sure I catch everybody. We have Paragoti, Tokyo 503. I think I said hello to before. Paragoti, excellent to have you. Who else? We've got Temiko, good to have you from New Zealand as well. Wow, it's late at night. They're 4 hours ahead of here, so 3 o'clock in the morning. I do appreciate you swinging by. Good to see you. Shubas, never fear. Good to have the Panama representative of the chat present. Good to have you. Buenos dias. Eugene Yo. I don't recognize the handle name, but Eugene Yo. If you're Eugene, good to have a Eugene in the chat. Good to have you here, and welcome indeed. We've got who else here? Dan H. Also, Langley Esquire is returning and doing a video with Japan's diplomat and USA talking about the new relationship with Biden. Yeah, Langley Esquire, I've promoted his channel here before. I mean, he is, I think he's like a professional diplomat consultant. I don't know actually how you get paid for that, but he gets great interviews and great guests on who are smart and know what they're talking about. So that's a great channel to follow. And I was not aware of that, Dan H., so thank you for calling that out. Man, what's going to happen with Biden? I've hardly even gotten into the topics. We're a long way in, and I could just start talking right now about what it's going to be like with President Biden. In terms of like the whole region and diplomatic relationships. And truth is, I have no idea. He's going to inherit, obviously, although it still is crazy that Pompeo is making some big plays that he's not going to have to carry any of the consequences for on his final days in. Not plays that I disagree with, but plays that you shouldn't be making without a long-term plan for dealing with them, as opposed to just throwing a rock and running away. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, it looks like Pompeo's strategy is to sort of lock Biden into a confrontational policy with China that he can't get out of. Which, may in some ways be justified, but it's now up to Biden to decide that, not him. I mean, it's a lame duck administration, particularly now that they've lost the Senate. So, yeah, it is going to be interesting to see what Biden does indeed. And the thing is to remember as well, I've said this multiple times, typically Democrats are just not and they're not hostile to Japan per se, although, well, they are during the primaries because they're going to offer auto worker union, endorsements in the primaries and whatnot. And there has been a tendency in the past to not want to appear too friendly to Japan or trade with Japan. This is why the TPP got so bashed in the Democrat primaries. But in the end of the day, it's normally, for a start, it's business-like, which will be a resumption of something normal. But typically, just in terms of how the cycle back and forth goes with Democrats and Republicans in Japan, not warm towards Japan typically, and not out of their way friendly. Typically, when Democrats come into power in the US, what happens is, prioritization of engagement with China and trade with China comes up, and engagement with Japan goes down. Typically, visits to the White House. Abe didn't even get a dinner, with Obama, whereas Xing did. In visits to the region, sometimes they even skip Japan and go straight to China, for reasons that are understandable and in the normal context when they were happening, but at the same time kind of made Japan feel a little bit pissed off. But at the same time, I mean, the Democrats still were providing the same amount of security, the same amount of free trade, and obviously it's always going to be, even if they're not paying more direct attention to Japan, the relationship with Japan is always going to be better. So, very different situation, however, now with Biden, and will be interesting to see what happens. Particularly, I don't know who he's going to choose for Secretary of State, but remember, Hillary Clinton basically got Hatoyama fired. She basically beat up and destroyed a Japanese liberal prime minister from the Democrats, no less. So, yeah, interesting times before and interesting times ahead. And but the point is, I mean, just having someone with two freaking brain cells to rub together to start with, and that, believe me, the oldest president in U.S. history. People worried about his mental faculties. Honestly, I will take any. I would just about take I would take someone certified as senile over the person right now who should be in jail. So, we'll see. And at least, and it's not so much what the president does, it's what the administration does. At least a resumption of professionalism would be nice. So we'll see. Anyway, I'm looking forward to some actual stable US leadership returning, which has been desperately missing. Not that much, Des. Good to see you. Savas Musician, excellent to see you. Hope that cryptocurrency stays strong. Well, indeed, cryptocurrency, another thing just in recent days that's kind of understandably, again, I'm not entirely, some people are saying, oh, this is Trump picking on cryptocurrency, but now suddenly passing laws requiring that you have to declare if you hold cryptocurrency in amounts above a certain threshold or transactions above a certain threshold. Some people say, oh, this is going to destroy cryptocurrency, but at the same time, I mean, for the reason that it is very attractive for organized crime to use, which unquestionably it is, and I'm sure that's actually contributed to the rise in cryptocurrency. But at the same, so the idea that of making people, liable legally required for tracking and reporting those, and for exchanges to record those transactions. At the same time, I do hope that it stays strong. I actually think it's as a technology, it's a good thing, and I've been considering using it more myself. But again, and these are all sensible things to do, or they make sense. But again, they make sense when you're doing them as part of a forward-looking strategy, not a scorched earth strategy as you leave as a lame duck. So yeah, interesting times on that. Zenedith is a handle name I don't recognize. Excellent to see more people in the comments. I'm going to say, moving back to Japan after 8 years. You've been in Melbourne, where you've had 6 months of strict lockdown. Indeed, I was. Well, my mum's actually just gotten back to Queensland from Victoria, but went there for Christmas, and the worst happened while she was down there. They went back into lockdown, and then Queensland went into lockdown as well, or Brisbane did. So, I feel for you guys. And when I was down there, geez, before the pandemic, at the end of last year, I was down in Melbourne. You had the fires and everything. It was crazy. So, yeah, Melbourne deserves a year off, definitely. And, congratulations on making it back to Japan. Wow, so many comments. Great to see. Maddie, great to see. Probably shouldn't book your Airbnb during the Olympics. No, if you want to go to the Olympics, book an Airbnb. Who knows? You could actually get a good rate. And I think that the government's still hell-bent on making it happen. But yes. Timiko, I'm sorry, you're in Tokyo. I say that every time, and you're in Tokyo. Well, that makes me feel less guilty about keeping you up, because I know that probably listening to me would have an effect of making anybody watching at 3 o'clock in the morning sleepy. So, yes. Sachi, for Americans' patience for conspiracy theories has dramatically fallen as well. Yeah, I could have spent this whole show talking about. I tell you, I have written and sometimes deleted, and normally deleted before posting. Sometimes I've posted and not deleted, and then gone and deleted a few minutes later. A lot of posts the last few days. I am so frustrated, and I'm not even American, and I try desperately to look the other way. But I can't even imagine how it must be for Americans to see what's been happening. So infuriating, just what happened. I mean, how clearly the incitement to armed people going in and threatening, and it was all set up in advance. And, and I've thought very liberal thoughts about what's happened, not in terms of supporting the protesters, the opposite, the fact is the president incited and directed a mob to go and kill a police officer. I mean, that's what it amounted to, and getting a bunch of other people killed. And the people who died, I don't feel any sympathy for. You saw, it's horrible, the video of seeing the person get shot, and it shouldn't have happened, but damn, those police that did it were clearly doing their job, and clearly doing what should have happened probably a long time before they got to that point. I'm going to stop, I'm doing it, I'm not going to do it, but damn, and I do hope that they chase up, especially the elected like that. Derek Evans, there's actual elected Republicans, and the number of current serving police and military that flashed IDs to go to help convince the police to allow them through the lines to go into the Capitol. Man, they've all got to go to jail, and not for trespass, not for something that they could get a suspended sentence for. They've got to be put in jail. And I'm worried what's going to happen with the inauguration as well. The fact that they got that far with zip ties and guns and stuff. I'm doing it, and I don't want to do it. I'm going to stay on the state of emergency. Yes, my patience for conspiracy theories has fallen dramatically. And by the way, if we're still friends on Facebook, congratulations. It means you've not been posting conspiracies in the last few days, because I've got a pretty high tolerance for a diverse group of perspectives on my Facebook. But the last few days, if you've been posting anything supporting anti-democratic terrorism in the last few days, I have removed you as a friend on Facebook. There's not a lot of people. There's only 4 or 5 people. Some of them seem like perfectly nice people as well, but I've removed them. I just don't want to see. I don't want to see the Italian conspiracy. I don't want to see it anymore. So yes, indeed, Papa Power, good to see you. Wow, so many people in the comments. Great to see all you guys. I have to move on, because I will never stop if I start talking about America. Quint Rankin, Biden brain cells. Well, yeah, LOL, but still, I'll take it over what we've got by a million times. I mean, having a criminal with brain cells, I would take and it's a criminal, straight up, like, that was incitement to murder a police officer. Like, straight up, that person should be in jail. And I'm glad he did it late, because he won't have time to pardon himself if they just arrest him a day after he stops being president, which is what they should do. And, by the way, I don't think that they should. I hate it in third world countries when they go and arrest, former presidents after they're out, including in Korea, because it sets a precedent that the next president's going to be worried that they're going to be arrested when they go out, and it motivates them to hold on to power more tightly, and reinforces the dictatorship cycle. So I think actually normally you should give even third world presidents a bit of leeway, because it's important to have stable, peaceful handovers. That reinforce a democratic cycle in these countries, particularly where democracy is fragile. I say that, but the crime in this case is actually setting up a negative cycle. It's actually opposing democracy, and for that, I think an example needs to be made. So, anyway. But let's remember who was in favor of all the TPP before they weren't. Oh, indeed, Quint Rankin, that's right, Biden. But Republicans and Democrats alike, we're all in favor of TPP, and it's always the Democrats that dump their position on the TPP right when it's around election time. They do it for votes, and it's insincere and dishonest. Particularly Clinton, I couldn't stand it. She wrote the TPP and then disowned it for votes right at the time that it was getting signed. I almost don't care anymore either whether America comes back to it or not. This is the thing. I mean, but the damage on that issue was clearly both sides. No dispute on that. Tai Nakamura, excellent to see you. Ohio, indeed. Quint Rankin, someone should be in jail. Who and on what charge? Well, again, where I'm coming from, this should be trial by combat, and you should march in and take over the Capitol during the vote over the election. Like from just the videos of the speeches that were given before the mob went and started killing people in the Capitol, I would say that the people who incited that mob should be in jail, as well as the people in the mob who went and killed people and tried to overthrow America's democracy. They should all be in jail. I don't think that's a controversial statement. But yeah. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to talk about America. Why was that more upsetting than what's been happening over the past year in places like Portland? Because, well, I don't know. I mean, I think actually in Portland, I mean, setting up in front of a courthouse. I mean, wanting to take over a courthouse or riot or whatever. I mean, fine. And look, the government was able to protect the courthouse there for however long. But I think that's different to actually trying to hang the vice president and trying to, assassinate and arrest and take hostage the Speaker of the House and actually interfere with the vote for the that's nothing in Portland was anything like a coup of the national democracy of the executive, led by the actual president. I mean, that's President Maduro. That's Venezuela style shit. Nothing in Portland or anything else came anything close to the impact of that or to the significance of what happened this week. I'm going to stop. I'm sorry. I shouldn't even. Okay. I'm not going to talk about America anymore. And even if you ask me questions about it, I'm not going to answer it because, like I say, we're all just going to get wound up. And I want this to be a place where you get away from that. But damn, it's infuriating. Black Tengu, good to see you. Wow, so many people in the comments. Great to see everybody commenting. And well, Antifa's irrelevant. They were all Republicans and white supremacists during this week. I'm doing it. It's irrelevant. It's absolutely like you might as well say Al-Qaeda. Does Al-Qaeda's fun times count as anti-democratic tourism? Yes, Al-Qaeda's does. The Republicans does this week, and Antifa's does as well. Absolutely. I'm not in favor of violence or rioting. I'm not pro-Antifa anything, but it's irrelevant. They weren't involved. The Republicans and the KKK and white supremacists were, and they were allowed to do it. So, and sure, they are worse. Al-Qaeda is worse. BLM and Antifa, and I mean, what do you want? The Red Brigades from Japan, but are they worse? I mean, this is the thing. Are they worse than white supremacists and militia terrorists? I mean, the Oklahoma City bombing, the takeover of the Michigan, no, I don't think that they're actually worse. But who cares? It's irrelevant. Hitler's worse. But what matters is who was there this week. Oh, I'm going to stop. I got to stop. Whataboutisms, exactly. It's irrelevant. Anyway, I just hope they all go to jail. All of them. Everybody responsible for what happened. And look, and anyone responsible for criminal behavior in any protest. I don't care what the protest is about. Or what viewpoint, BLM, Antifa, whatever, break laws, sure, go to jail. That's all good. But this week, absolutely. I mean, that's actually War of 1812 type stuff. So anyway, except it wasn't even a national thing. I'm going to stop. That is the number of cases in Tokyo, 2,447. That is an alarming peak. Number of Muslims growing fast. This is actually just a really interesting article in The Economist pointing out that there are now 110,000 Muslims. Of course, Muslims that are non-Japanese Muslims. There are actually some Japanese Muslims now as well as, of course, Muslims is not a national designation. Of course, you can be, British or American Muslims living in Japan. I'm sure there are large numbers of those, but of course the largest numbers come from Pakistan, Indonesia, actually a lot from Philippines and countries like Myanmar as well that also come to Japan. Countries where they're in minorities, but it's an interesting threshold because I actually went and looked at the statistics for foreigners in Japan, and just for an idea, when we talk about foreigners or fellow foreigners in Japan, there is a trap that often people like myself, when we talk about foreigner troubles, we often talk about the foreigners that we relate most to, which are people from English-speaking countries, or particularly. Sort of the Anglo countries in Japan. Yeah, we often forget, we point this out in other contexts, what a small percentage of the foreigners there are. There are 2 million foreigners living in Japan. We're about 2% of the population. And yet the combined population of Canadians, Americans, Brits, Australians, New Zealanders in Japan amounts to 97,000 people. So actually, and while many of those are Muslims, I'm not saying them as exclusive groups. It's interesting now that, again, of course, when you talk about foreigners, nearly 1 million now are Chinese, still about a few 100,000 now are Vietnamese. I think they're taking over from Koreans, so I think about 500,000. But of course, you're talking about Iranians, you're talking about Filipinos, Vietnamese, Chinese, Koreans, way before you're ever talking about people who speak English and culturally relate to me. But it is a threshold now that in terms of the groupings of foreigners in Japan, always important to remember it's actually more likely to be a Muslim than it is to be someone from an English-speaking country. And this is another recent trend, like the increase in Vietnamese people coming into Japan. In terms of, and it's deliberately being promoted. It's growing fast because the Japanese government is promoting immigration from Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia. They're looking for trained nurses. The program for that has not really worked out very well because it's turned out it's hard to train people in foreign countries to learn Japanese well enough to get medical certification to be able to work in Japan as nurses. That has not worked out so well. But at the same time, between that and the very problematic apprenticeship visa system, which again is a way to get workers from Eurasia into Japan to support the economy. Japan actually, and this was a thing 10 or 12 years ago when they were looking to get more, particularly nurses and caregivers into Japan. They realized that if they want people from Indonesia, they have to actually set up infrastructure for things like, for temples, for access to halal food, and all of these things like that were almost non-existent 15 years ago. They really have sprung up, and the infrastructure for living comfortably, particularly in large cities as a Muslim, has rapidly improved. Still, there are big problems, including there was actually a news feature on NHK the other week about how Muslims in places like Kyushu, for example, really struggle for things like burial. From the perspective, this affects some Christians as well that don't like the idea of cremation. It's actually prohibited, I think, under Islam. Whereas in Japan, something like 99.8% of all, if you die in Japan, you're going to be cremated, basically. It's almost impossible to actually get buried as a body. There are very few cemeteries that accept. Apparently, in the entire island of Kyushu, there are no cemeteries that even allow the burial of a corpse. You have to be cremated. And this is, for people who live there and for who that contradicts religious beliefs. That's a huge problem. And trying to buy land to be able to, a group of Muslims in Kyushu tried to buy an area just to be able to have a burial plot. And local town councils opposed it because they thought it was weird to be burying people in the ground. Which, I mean, I suppose I can see it the other way around. It certainly is a lot more hygienic. So there still are challenges, but the fact is that, again, when you talk about consideration towards foreigners, we used to think it was having bilingual signs in English and stuff like that. Now it's really about having halal food and, cemeteries and stuff like that, and progress is being made. But again, I do like the fact that it reflects the increasing diversity of Japan, and it's important, I think, as a foreigner to remember that, to be humble and realize that as an English-speaking foreigner, we are a minority among minorities, and to think that we shouldn't just be thinking about ourselves when we're thinking about the needs of foreigners in Japan. And for all of those right-wing weebs that like Japan because they believe Japan is a country that outlaws Muslims and how that became a thing a few years ago, I mean, fuck you guys to death for a start. But on top of that, it's factually completely wrong. Japanese government's been setting up infrastructure and rapidly promoting the immigration of people, particularly from Southeast Asia, but also from other countries, to come and live in Japan and take care of Japanese people. And the other thing is that before you start spouting, completely irrational, racist, stuff. Looking at Japan as an idealized sort of homogenous society for white supremacists to look up to and think is something that they should remodel their societies on. Look at the relationship of Japanese people in Indonesia. It's complicated. It's a fascinating topic. Japanese are really tight with Indonesians, and the religion doesn't even come into it. But But the result is that they're very friendly, and they proactively, when they look at the entire world and say, well, where do we want the people changing our diapers in elderly people homes to come from? They want them from the Philippines and from Indonesia, and and it's an afterthought, making sure that they have the religious infrastructure to support it. They don't care. The only time Japan really cared about the import of religion was really during the Edo period, and that was that they were afraid that if they allowed too many missionaries in, those missionaries were going to screw them and colonize them, because that's what happened in the Philippines and other parts of Asia, and they learned from it, and it was correct. The enemy was always, frankly, Christianity. They've never really had a big problem with Islam. So, just a nice little reminder to be humble, and I think this is actually a really positive milestone, not only for Japan, but actually for the foreign community as well, just to appreciate the diversity that we have within our community. An interesting note as well, there's among much of the discussion that I slightly unleashed myself upon a few moments ago that I will stop talking about the invasion of the Capitol during the presidential vote. During this week, a similar thing happened, reminder during the AMPO protest. The AMPO is the security treaty between the US and Japan. And this, remember, in 1960, this was 7 years after the occupation, and there was a lot of ambiguity. Both communists and extreme right-wingers were opposed to having a security treaty with America that basically made Japan a protectorate of the U.S. And the riots that opposed it, it became, I guess, what extreme right-wingers and racists in America would probably call left-wing Antifa. I mean, anything that they think isn't them. But it was left-wingers, and it was actual communists, by the way. And the results of these protests actually became terrorists. These people who tried to invade Parliament became the Red Army that actually did become hardened terrorists. I hope this doesn't happen in America, but the same thing happened, that these people, a lot of young people, a lot of excited university students, even high school students, came and they broke into Parliament, they shut down Parliament, and a woman was shot and killed. This happened in 1960, and it resulted in a trait when I'm working from home. And yeah, it was... I'm trying to find out what sort of flavors I like. I know that the pods are environmentally hostile, but I'm going to find the ones that I like, maybe even find some ones that I think you can reuse. But I'm enjoying that. If people have recommendations for what Nespressos I should be getting, I'll take suggestions, although I'm not really a coffee connoisseur, I'll admit. I just take it purely medicinally to concentrate, and because I discovered that having Republitan was destroying my pancreas. But yes. Coming back, I'm going to avoid American chatter if I can. Well, this stuff, man, there's so many people talking here. Let's get South President Harris and get to the point. Anyone, honestly, I would take Charlie Sheen right now. And look, it doesn't matter what I think because I'm a New Zealander. Thank heavens. So I see that we've got Lord Crunk. Excellent to have you. Destroy all computers. Why not? Destroy electricity. Good stuff. Why not? Come hell or high water. That's a weird thing to say. And again, what's your tone? Look, I think it's an excellent thing. Better food, better people. I mean, great. I welcome. I hope this country. I would love if the majority of foreigners in Japan become Muslims. Why the hell not, right? Yeah. Asian foreigners are the biggest proportion. Well, of course, and you know, many of those Asians are Muslims. It's just part of the deal here. But certainly Chinese, far and away. Something like half of all the foreigners in Japan are Chinese for a start, and Vietnamese are coming up as well. So, you know, definitely nothing like, but people forget that when they talk about foreigners. They always talk about it in a self-referential way. That's what I meant about that. Paragoti, would I happen to know the appeal of Islam to Japanese as compared to Christianity? Yeah, interesting. Not as I understand it exists. There are Japanese Muslims, mainly who are married to foreigners, but it hasn't really caught on. Christianity has a long history in Japan. There were people who were converted in Japan during the Edo period, during the closed country period, and there were missionaries who were successful at recruiting people here. There are even cults within Japan based on what looked like Russians who came in pretending to be Jesus and actually started religions around themselves. And in like Akita Prefecture and in Kyushu, there are actual statues of people who believe, the religions that believe that Jesus came to Japan. And it seems that there were probably people pretending to be Jesus who came to Japan. So there's actually, there are, I mean, the deputy prime minister also was a Christian. There are hundreds of thousands. So it's very different. Christianity actually has a long established history in Japan. Islam does not. But yeah, it's an interesting area, of course, and as a religion, it was extremely persecuted when the shogunate decided that allowing Catholic missionaries in might not be a good idea. They actually got pretty nasty, and they did a lot of things to the Japanese who were Christians. They actually did a lot to force their conversion away from the religion. Fascinating topic, by the way. Coming through, Leona Inda, good to have you in here. An Indonesian weeb who used to live in Japan. Complicated. This is an understatement. Would love for you because I'm to delve into the topic further one day. Hey, Leona, excellent to have you here. And I don't know an awful lot about Indonesia. I used to live nearby. I grew up in Singapore, and I just think the relationship between Japan and Indonesia is just fascinating. I have talked about it before, and I would love to talk about it again, but it's incidental. But Leona, as you may be familiar, it's complicated because Japanese, both during World War II itself and after World War II, a lot of Japanese, both as the Imperial Army and as individuals, supported the nationalists in Indonesia that got independence for Indonesia, and all the complicated consequences of that within Indonesia, including with vis-a-vis the Chinese community there, that and how that was bad, both facing the Japanese and facing the nationalists. But Devi Sukarno, yeah, she still is a celebrity in Japan who married the nationalist leader there, who I have very mixed views on, because I have Chinese Indonesian friends who have had to leave Indonesia in the 1990s when things got very bad then. I mean, a fascinating, complicated country, Indonesia, but again, the relationship with Japan, I think, is a wonderful thing. And I think it's great to see the improving ties. And I love the food, and the people that I've met from there have all been awesome. Excellent to have you in the comments, and thanks for dropping a comment there, Leona. Tech Out 2, stream paused. Yeah, that was probably, I don't know, the algorithm gods. Yeah, they did. Mr. Cordychap, it was... it's not a good thing what happened, but yes, at the same time, I don't know whether the shogunate going and turning on Christianity saved Japan from being colonized, or whether it was unnecessary and a brutal repression. It was probably both. But yeah. Anyway, other topics. Oh, geez, we're already over time, and there is this. The South Korean court ordered Japanese to pay former comfort women. Some people said, hey, haven't they done that already? And actually, they haven't. The courts in Korea have always been kind of suppressed by the government. That's always kind of suppressed. Korea's been in this awkward position that the Korean government did a deal with Japan to accept a whole bunch of compensation for all war-related matters in 1965. And successive government, but they also made the Japanese government promise to keep it secret from the Korean people so that they could spend the money on national development, which they did, and it worked out well for Korea. But of course, it put them in this awkward position that they didn't want to admit to having done a deal with Japan, because they wanted to be able to bash Japan as a way to get votes and legitimacy. But at the same time, they knew that they couldn't recognize claims for compensation. And it always meant that the government would always sort of stifle these claims for compensation, and people in Korea didn't know why, which added to their rage and anger, understandably, believing that they had never been compensated. The truth is, the Korean government got the compensation and they spent it all. And they couldn't understand why the Korean government was blocking them from these claims. And it was always kind of held up in the courts. But I think what's happened with the intergenerational thing and the reinforced belief over generations that the people who knew in secret that a deal had been done, all getting older, new people coming in who grew up believing that Japan had never apologized and never paid compensation, to which Japan apologized again and set up a Comfort Women Fund in the 1990s, and again apologized in the 2000s, and again set up a final resolution just 2 years ago, and every time it gets rejected. And the indignation among the population there that sincerely believes that Japan still has never compensated and never apologized and never done anything about this issue. The fact is, Japan has done this many times over, but the emotion about the issue is so strong in Korea, and it's now gotten into the courts where it's a public policy thing. You have to recognize damages both on war labor and comfort women, and the Japanese government isn't responding angrily that this is a violation of international law. They're angry at the Korean government, by the way, for abdicating its international law obligations. Not at the comfort women or the courts or whatever over there, but the national mood there has just been so reinforced through education and politics for so long that Japan is just unmitigatedly evil over this issue, and it hasn't made it right. It's just impossible to fix. And this is the problem. Japan has paid and apologized multiple times, and it always leads to more. So Japan will look like the bad guy on this because they are the ones that use the comfort women. And the comfort women have not been compensated. This is the other point, that they're out of pocket. So and again, it makes Japan just look terrible, and they're going to go on. And they're probably all going to pass away soon, and this is going to permanently damage relations with South Korea and Japan. But that's what it is. It's a horrible issue, and it's bad timing. But it can't be fixed. I used to be optimistic that this could be fixed. I thought Koizumi fixed it. I thought Murayama fixed it. Then I thought Koizumi fixed it. Then I thought Abe fixed it. It's not fixable. It's a shame. I do hope that the comfort women and their families do get compensated. I think that compensation should be paid by the Korean government. The Japanese government set up this fund 2 years ago to go and pay them, but the groups that support the comfort women oppose them collecting the payments as sort of as a bribe for not dealing with the matter properly. And it turned out that some of the advocates who were encouraging the comfort women not to accept the payments from Japan turned out that they were pocketing donations for keeping the group, which were based on keeping the issue alive, and they've gone to jail for that. But how messed up. The whole thing is messed up, and it's a shame, and it's sad, and it's depressing, but it's not going to get fixed. And that's the Japanese government being upset, like, you guys, are you seriously, are you telling us again that we have to do this? But of course it looks like Japan being belligerent about being Nazis. That's how it looks. You know, it doesn't look like Japan has a leg to stand on, but they're standing on it, and they kind of do, but you just don't look good saying it. That's the problem. That is how it is. I haven't actually seen the label that says lager, but yes, apparently Sapporo Lager, they misspelled lager, Lagear. Yeah, as a result, they recalled the entire batch of beer from Family Mart. The Japanese internet reacted that they don't care. In fact, if it's cheaper, they would like to buy it. Honestly, the way with New Zealand's binge drinking culture, I'm pretty sure people probably wouldn't even notice. I'm not sure how people, high school kids would notice. We definitely read the labels when we were in high school and drinking beers. We'd compare the alcohol amounts. We probably wouldn't notice that lager was misspelled. But that was a funny thing. Yeah, for moving abroad, this was interesting. Wow, we are over time, and I'm going to keep charging through. Countries where people want to work, apparently, or where people want to live and work. This is fascinating. For Canada and United States of America, and for a lot of places, Australia, Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, Japan. Japan is the second most popular country in the world to go and live and work. It's funny, most New Zealanders want to live in Fiji, and most Fijians want to live in New Zealand. I could do a deal there, it seems. But it's funny, second to Canada, that Japan is a popular destination. So that is a thing. And yeah, just as I said before, I think it's great, actually. I think Taiwan should be recognized as a country. It is a country, and it's terrible how it gets screwed. But at the same time, the idea that Taiwan is the legitimate government of China instead of the PRC is obviously ridiculous. And no one thinks that. But at the same time, Taiwan's existed as an independent political entity for most of the last 150 years. Is separate to China. It's only actually been united with China for like 20 of those years, and the idea that right now that the world is being intimidated by China into abusing Taiwan, as a country, population bigger than Australia, and it's very close to Japan, and I think this is a good thing. But at the same time, China very well might attack Taiwan over this. I mean, they've demonstrated that politics and nationalism will always trump a short-term economic or political benefit, and so it's a dangerous thing to suddenly say that you're going to normalize it, especially if you don't have a game plan for backing that up and making sure that you're going to protect Taiwan. So to do that 6 days before you change government is a little bit irresponsible, but I agree with it. I just wish that if they'd done it, if you do something like that, do it at the start of your administration, not as you're packing up to leave. High risk situations in Japan, just don't go to karaoke, don't drink, even though the government's encouraging people to do that. Sumo tournament started without 65 wrestlers because they were scared or sick, and yet and this is what the Olympics could be like. So I think that is a thing, and that is all the topics that I have for this week. I raced through a little bit at the end. Salutations to J-Vlog, good to have you here. The spell checker, I like the spelling. Great to see so many comments tonight. Audio Vision, good to have you. And Comfort Woman, I should have done in inverted commas, of course, but it was, of course, it should not have happened. I wish it could be resolved, but it can't. But anyway, good to see everybody. Really love the interaction tonight. Love all the comments. It did go over time. I hope America settles down. Congrats on having a new president this week, and I am looking forward to some sort of normalcy. I'm hoping that the maniacs that we saw the other day are done. I'm very much looking forward to the year ahead from a Japan dealing with the world perspective. And it's been a eventful start to the year, but yes, I really do not want this to be a turbocharged version of last year, and I don't think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of good things. I'm an optimist. What can we do? 14 minutes overtime. Yes, Mr. Cordy Chap. Yeah, if I hadn't talked about America, I would have been exactly on time, hadn't I? So that was the lesson. No more talking about America in future, although America's pretty good at drawing attention to itself. Only vis-a-vis Japan and not vis-a-vis anything else, because honestly what I say doesn't matter. I'm not American. I'm a New Zealander living in Japan. I shouldn't give a shit. I do, because I love the place. I really do. and what America is important, but at the same time, it's not my place to get wound up or upset. It is the place of Americans to do it, and I feel for you guys a lot, and I hope you guys have a great week as well, and stay safe. The pandemic is getting worse everywhere. In Tokyo as well. I'm just going to keep sitting here. I've got nowhere else to go. I'll be here next week. 2230 JST YouTube. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter if you ever want to chat or connect. And I love having you guys here. I really love the interaction tonight. A lot of great comments, and I do appreciate it. Remember, if you like the show, it helps the show. Bit of encouragement, and have a good week, everybody. And stay safe. Peace. Boom. Quick rank it. Amen. Good night.